will work in a bit. All right. Okay, hang on, actually. Okay, so as I said, welcome to this class. My name is Jacqueline. Now, I just wanted to, today what we're going to do is just a little bit of administration, okay, and then we'll move into the lecture. For those of you who don't know me, I really like it if you can talk to me. It makes the class more exciting for all of us, right, more interactive. So please, feel free to ask questions as we go along. All right, so if you go onto Blackboard, hopefully you have all done that and got the notes for this week. We have, so under Learning Resources, of course, you'll see all of the materials for each week. Now for this week, you'll see there are some extra little clips on Blackboard, which we won't be going through in class, so that's just optional if you want to have a look at some extra information. We will be talking about the impossible trinity today, but that's a really nice clip just explaining exactly how it works, so if you want to go have a look at that after class. And then we've got some other videos which talk a little bit about more of the issues that we're talking about in class today, just for your information, right? Just for some extra information for you. Okay, so, right. As I said, my name's Jacqueline. My office is in room 352 of Colin Clark Building. So those of you who had me before, I have actually moved offices. So come and see me in my new office. My consultation is 1:30 to 2:30 on Wednesdays. Now I will have more consultation closer to around examination times as well. So I'll let you know what those times are. So please feel free to come and see me during consultation. I will be very happy to see you and help you with your questions. If you come and see me outside of consultation, I might be less happy to see you, or I might not be there. So if you can't make it to my consultation times and you really do want to come see me, please send me an email and then we can organise a time, okay? Of course, you can always email me questions. I would prefer if you don't email me long calculation questions. They're just quite hard to do over email. So if you have quite a complicated calculation question, probably better to come and see me. Our textbook is Yun and Resnick. The 8th edition looks like this. There is also an electronic version of it. I think it's only like $50, so the electronic version. There's also additional questions and practice questions, and there's a smart book so you can like highlight and write notes or whatever. So have a look at that. I would encourage you to get the textbook. In terms of assessment, there are 3 pieces of assessment for this course. The first one is the mid-semester exam. Now that's going to be worth 30% of your final grade. It's going to be held at 5 p.m. on Wednesday the 28th of March, so that's in week 6. Now in your notes it might say that it's going to be in the Heath room. So most of you will be in the Heath room, but we've had many students sign up for this course. So some of you will be in a different room, but I will let you know closer to the time once that's all booked. It's going to cover topics 1 to 4. And we won't have class that week. I'm so kind, I'm giving you extra time to study, right? So there's no classes that week. It's the week immediately before the mid-semester break as well. The individual assignment is 20%. It's due on the 8th of May. The individual assignment is already available on Blackboard, so if you want to start it, please go ahead. There are 2 questions in the assignment. The first one you should be able to do after today's lecture, okay? So you're very welcome to start. The second part of the assignment will be on topic 8, but of course, if you want to go ahead and start, that's great. Okay, now I do not answer questions about the assignment in person. So if you come and ask me, or if you send me email about assignment questions, I will not tell you the answer. That's because I want everybody to have the same information. So what I have done is you will see on Blackboard, I have made available a number of discussion boards, okay? So there is 1 discussion board per part of the question. So if you have an assignment question, please post it to the discussion board and I will answer it there, I promise, all right? There's also, I've also made another discussion board at the end, which is for a question about the assignment that doesn't relate to one specific question, if that makes sense. So please post your assignment questions there. Don't email me or ask me. So that way, and of course, that you can also read what other students have asked, because often students will have the same question. So please make use of that. There's also a general discussion board, so if you have other questions relating to the course, not relating to the assignment, please feel free to use that discussion board and I will answer those as well. All right. The final exam is worth 50%, and that will cover the entire course, but of course the focus will be more on topics 5 to 10, since the mid-semester exam will cover topics 1 to 4. The electronic course profile is available on Blackboard, so please make sure you have a read of that. That has got more information about if you need a supplementary exam or etc. So what we're going to be doing in this course, So what do I expect of you? I do expect you to attend seminars, as I said. Question? Yep. Yes, sorry. Yeah.
Because in the semester, in the middle exam,
Yep.
it's class with others lecturer.
Yep.
How to do this one?
Are there 2 lectures in that class? Can you ask your lecturer if you can attend the other lecture that week?
No.
There's only one?
Yeah.
Can you tell me what course that is? Can you come see me at the end and just tell me what course it is, and I'll have a chat with that lecturer and see what we can do. Okay, thank you. Thanks for bringing that to my attention. Any other questions on assessment? All good? Okay. All right, so what are we doing? So what I expect of you, I expect you to attend seminars. Now, on Blackboard, I have made available some questions for each week. So there's no tutorials in this class, so please, if you can go through those questions yourselves, and the solutions are available on Blackboard as well. So that's just for extra practice for you. All right, please don't be chatting on your phone or to your classmates while I'm talking. That makes me really grumpy. So if you do have a question, please ask me, okay? Please ask questions in the seminar. As I said, you can ask questions in my consultation times or email me, and I've shown you the discussion board as well. All right, so what is this course about? This week we're going to look at Introduction to International Financial Management and the International Monetary System. Actually, do you want me to change the lights a bit? Is this all right? Can you see okay? It's okay? Really? Okay. All right. So today is a lot of conceptual work, so that's what we're doing today. Topics 2 to 4 is going to be looking at exchange rates, so we have a lot more hands-on mathematical questions starting from next week. Topic 5, we're going to be looking at derivatives. Now, how many of you know what derivatives are or have looked at derivatives in other courses? Just a couple. How many of you have actually done the derivatives course? Okay, all right, that's fine. So we'll spend a little bit of time examining what derivatives are and then looking at the application to foreign currency. Thank you, that's helpful for me. Topic 6 and 7, we're looking at exchange rate exposure. Topic 8, international investments. Topic 9, cost of capital, sourcing equity and debt, and political risk. And then topic 10, we're going to look at capital budgeting. So we've got 10 topics. Topic 11, we're going to be doing a revision. Okay, so pretty normal. All right, so what are we doing in this class? In this class, we're talking about international financial management. So hopefully all of you have done FINEM 7401 or an equivalent, yes? Yep. How many of you have done other finance classes as well? Okay, so most of you, but not all of you. That's all right. So in this class, what we're doing is really in FINEM 7401, what we talked about was financial decision making. So we looked at how do we decide whether we should go ahead with a project or not, for example. And when we did that, what did we look at? So how did we evaluate a project? What was the decision rule for evaluating a project? Very good, net present value, okay? So to come up with a net present value, we first forecast what? Our cash flows. We first forecast our cash flows, then we discounted our cash flows, very good, using what as the discount rate? The weighted average cost of capital? Yes, I know I've taught you this. You who are in my class, I know you know this, I've taught you this. All right, we also looked at how to value debt, how to value equity, All right, so what we're doing in international financial management is we're saying, right, but what about if we now have an international company, right? So what about if we have a subsidiary in another country? Okay, what about if our suppliers are in another country or our customers are in another country? What about if we want to raise debt or equity in another market? So once we expand from a domestic to an international financial management, that's going to bring a whole lot of extra challenges, right? And a whole lot of extra factors that we need to think about as financial managers. So for example, okay, so here we have this is a brief example of some of the factors that we will need to think about when we're moving to the international environment. So here it talks about MNE. So MNE is a multinational enterprise. Could also be an MNC, a multinational corporation. Okay, multinational enterprise or multinational corporation. So what is that? That is a corporation that has operations in a number of different countries, right? So multinational, many nations. Okay, so when we're talking about a multinational, when we look at doing business in different countries, there's going to be cultural differences, right? So most of you are from a different country, yes? Most of you international students. So the way business is done in Australia, is that the same as the way business is done in, for example, China or Vietnam? Or where are you ladies from? Colombia? Yeah. So is business done in the same way? No. So there's cultural differences when we expand to an international environment, right? Corporate governance can be different. So corporate governance is looking at how institutions are run. So for example, part of corporate governance would be, what is the role of the board of directors? Okay. Now that is going to be different depending on which country you're in, because different countries have different legislation, right? Different institutional practices. Foreign exchange risk. Remember we talked about calculating a net present value? Well, what about if some of our sales are in another country? That means we're going to be having some of our cash flows in a different currency, right? What if some of our inputs are from another country? What if we have a subsidiary in another country? So obviously if we have operations overseas, then that is going to be in a different currency. That is going to affect the cash flows, right? Because the cash flows will be in a different currency. We know that currencies fluctuate. Yeah, we know exchange rates fluctuate. So that's going to impact on our decision making as well. Political risk. Political risk. Political risk is talking about what is happening with the government or the running of a particular country. All right? So an example of political risk would be how stable is the government in the country that we're expanding into. Right? So a very extreme example of political risk would be a government decides to expropriate assets. So what does expropriation mean? Government wakes up one day and says, all foreigner assets are going to be confiscated and they will now belong to us. Okay? So all foreign companies must get out of our country. This happens. This has happened. Right? So that is a political risk if you're going into a country where perhaps the government is not particularly stable, or perhaps the government is very controlling, right? So that's an extreme example of political risk. Okay, so all of these things are going to mean we need to modify our finance theories. So what you've learnt in 7401 and your other finance courses, yes, they still apply, but we need to think about all of these other factors as well, and they're going to impact on our investment decision making. Also, we might need to look at other financial instruments. So we talked about, for example, exchange rate risk. So how do we manage exchange rate risk? If we know we're going to have a cash flow in 5 years' time, well, what's the exchange rate going to be in 5 years' time? No idea, right? So how can we manage the risk that that cash flow could be a lot less or a lot more than we're expecting? So we'll talk about that later in the course. But basically, we can use derivatives to try and smooth out our currency risk. And we'll talk, as I said, we'll talk about that later on in the course. All right. So why do we actually need to think about international finance? Well, because we know that globalization has increased, right? So the world is more globalized now. In other words, there is more integration of markets. Why? Because we've got removal of regulatory barriers. We've got globalization of financial markets. What is that? So when we're talking specifically about financial markets, that's saying investors in one country might be able to invest in another country. Right? So a good example of this is China, right? So maybe 30 years ago or 50 years ago, foreigners wouldn't be able to invest in China. But now there is some investment, yeah? There is a special class of shares for foreigners. Yeah? Okay, so that's an example of opening up of markets. Trade liberalization and economic integration. So when you have, if you are a government and you have a domestic manufacturer, for example, so say you've got a domestic manufacturer who makes clothing, right? And you don't want international companies to sell clothing in your country because maybe your market is not as competitive. So what many governments do is they put tariffs or taxes on goods on foreign goods, right? So what does that do? So if you've got a foreign good that's come in, it should be cheaper, but you've got a big tax on it. What's that going to do to the price of those goods? It'll increase the price of those goods, so it'll make it less attractive for people to want to buy foreign goods, right? So what does that do? That protects the domestic economy, but it possibly means that those domestic manufacturers are not actually that competitive, right? So when we have things like free trade agreements, tariffs, for example, that will be reduced. So free trade agreements are agreements between two countries to try and increase trade between them. They can also include things like employment opportunities between two countries. Right? So, for example, Australia's has recently had a free trade agreement with the US. In 2015, there was a free trade agreement with China. And again, that was looking at trying to reduce some of the tariffs and also talking about movement of people, so employment between two countries. So what does that do? So basically, we would say this opens up the country, right? So it's more possible for goods and people to move between countries. And what's that going to do? That is going to increase globalization. Large-scale privatization of state-owned enterprises. State-owned enterprise is a business that is owned by who? Very good, by government, okay? So privatization means that individual investors can invest in those companies, and sometimes that international investors can invest in them as well. So what are the advantages of globalization? Globalization means that firms can expand their customer base. Who has ever bought anything that was made somewhere else? Everybody, right? Right? So we very much see globalization in goods, right? Every piece of clothing you buy has probably been made somewhere else, right? Made in China, made in Vietnam, whatever. Okay, so expanding your customer base. Take advantage of lower input and labour costs. So we know that different countries have different wage levels, right? So for companies, it can be advantageous to have your labour in a different country, right? Economies of scale. So this is saying if you have larger operations, it can be cheaper. It can be cheaper to produce your product. Sometimes there may be government concessions. That may also go the other way, so there may be worse taxes for foreign investors. There's also the possibility to expand your shareholder base. So if I'm an Australian company and I'm really, really a big company, okay, so for example, BHP, right? Australia's domestic market might not be big enough to finance the projects that I need to do. So where we have globalization, that means that I have the opportunity to raise funds from other countries. So for example, BHP is listed on a number of different stock exchanges. It's listed in the UK, it's listed on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. So that gives companies the access to more money for their projects, so in expanded shareholder base. Okay, what is one of the problems with globalization? Well, as we said, when we have cash flows in another country, that is going out or coming in from another country, that's going to expose us to foreign exchange rate risk. Here we have just one example. Now, I could have chosen many currencies. I've got the dollar-euro exchange rate. Now, so on the top, this is the actual exchange rate, so number of dollars per euro. The bottom is the exchange rate changes. Now, is this exchange rate stable? No, right? So the euro-dollar exchange rate has been anything from 0.8 to 1.6, right? So that's a significant variation in exchange rates, and you can see it moves up and down. So exchange rate movements constitute a risk for companies, a risk. Remember, how did we define risk? So a risk is the possibility that we receive more or less than we were expecting. Yeah? So if we've got changes in exchange rate, that's going to impact on our expected return or our cash flows, for example. So that's one of the costs of globalization. With political uncertainty, so we spoke a little bit about that already. Market imperfections can hinder globalization. Market imperfections are things that would stop free movement of cash flows, for example. So market imperfections can be things like taxes or tariffs. Could be things like restrictions on capital movement. So some governments only allow people to take out a certain amount of money out of the country or bring a certain amount of money in. Right? So that would be a market imperfection. Also, if you're moving into a different country, then there might be different regulations. So you might have capital controls. Again, capital controls is saying you're only allowed to bring in a certain amount of money or take a certain amount of money out. Disclosure requirements. So if your company is operating in another country, you might need to produce financial reports in that other country. The accounting rules could be different. Right? Each stock exchange would have different disclosure requirements. So that's going to be a cost for the company because now you need to produce multiple versions of your reporting. Does that make sense? Okay. There might be local laws. So, for example, different countries would have different environmental or labour laws. And there might be different taxation between countries as well. All right. So that's what makes international finance special, and that's why we're doing this course. Other than that, because you love finance and it's a really interesting course, right? But this is one of the other reasons. Before we move into our next section, I just wanted to talk about a little bit of terminology, so we're all on the same page. So a foreign currency exchange rate or an exchange rate is the price of one country's currency in the units of another. So, for example, if I had this exchange rate here, okay, so we've got what this exchange rate means is I've got 88 yen per Australian dollar. So in other words, it's going to cost 88 yen to buy 1 Australian dollar, or 1 Australian dollar will give me 88 yen, right? And we'll talk, next week is going to be all about exchange rates, so we'll talk more about that next week. The next thing I want you to be aware of is the international monetary system. So the international monetary system is basically talking about how does money between countries work? How does money work within particular economies and between countries? So what is the institutional framework? How are international payments made? How are exchange rates determined? Okay, so it's rules, institutions, mechanisms and policies. So how do exchange rates work? And how capital flows. So the international monetary system has developed over time and has changed quite a lot since the last 500 years, right? And of course it's continuing to develop and will do so in the future. We're going to look at the development of the IMS since a long time ago, since 1875. And we're going to look at 4 different stages of the development of the IMS. So ending with the current floating exchange rate. Not all countries have a floating exchange rate, so we'll talk about what that means when we get there. Okay, so starting out before 1875, a long, long time ago. So once upon a time, we had a bimetallism international monetary system. What does this mean? Bi, two, metal, two metals. Okay, so currency used to be two metals. What were they? Gold and silver. Right, so before the 19th century, we had this gold and silver, so bimetal standard. Some countries were on gold, so in some countries you could only use gold as money, in some countries you could only use silver, and in some countries you could use both. All right? So exchange rates between countries were determined by the gold or the silver content of the actual coins. Right. So that was a very long time ago. Moving on to a less long time ago, we had the gold standard. All right. So under the gold standard, you had countries fixing their money to the value of gold. All right? So the value of a currency is fixed to the value of gold. So 1 ounce, for example, 1 ounce could be $20 US, 1 ounce of gold. What is an ounce? What does it measure? Weight. Yep. So an ounce measures weight, right? So 1 ounce of gold would be equivalent to 2067. The gold price is referred to as mint parity, and it's going to determine the exchange rate between countries. National currency is only issued with gold backing. There's no movement, no restrictions on the movement of gold. In other words, gold can move between countries. All right? And governments are going to be ready to sell or buy gold at the mint parity. I'll talk about what that means in 1 second. Okay, so how do we work out what the exchange rate between two currencies is? Well, this is actually what we would call a cross rate, which we'll talk about next week, but just to flag that with you now. So if I have US dollars and I have British pounds, and I want to know what is the exchange rate between US dollars and British pounds, what do I do? Well, first of all, I look at the value of the US dollar. So the US dollar is pegged to gold at $20.67. Pegged means fixed. So the US dollar is fixed at $20.67 per ounce. The British pound is fixed to gold, is pegged to gold at £4.2474 per ounce. OZ, ounce. Okay, OZ is an ounce. So what is the exchange rate between US dollars and pounds? So your turn to work this out, please. There is a box for you to work it out. Okay, done? You done? Yeah. Okay, so since 20 US dollars, 20.67 US dollars is going to be 4.2474 pounds. That means that one pound is going to be 4.8665 US dollars. If you did it the other way around, so if you did 1 US dollar to pound, that's fine as well. Okay. I don't know what that is, 0.2 something? Did anyone do it the other way around? No? Okay. So basically what we've got is we've got the value of the US dollar to gold and the value of the pound to gold. So what is the value of the US dollar to the pound, right? That's what we call a cross rate, which we'll, as I said again, we'll talk about next week. Okay, so let's check. Let's check. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a trading strategy. So I'm going to buy 1 ounce of gold in the USA, which means I will pay $20.67 per that. I'm going to put it on a boat, right? We're talking about 1913, right? So we put it on a boat and ship it to England, right? And I'm going to sell it for the current rate in the UK, so £4.247, and I receive my pounds. Okay? What I'm going to do is I'm then going to convert my currency back to US dollars. So my exchange rate is 4.8665. So am I going to multiply or divide by this rate? I'm going to multiply. Yep, because it's 1 pound is 4.8. So I've got pounds, so I'm going to multiply by that exchange rate. Okay, so how much US dollars should I get? Okay, so I should get 20.67, right? So what this means is, correct, yep, we've got the exchange rate right, first of all, so that's good. Is this strategy going to make me a profit? What is my profit by using this trading strategy? My profit is going to be 0, right? So this means that the exchange rates are correct. Yep, so the exchange rates are working correct. In this example, we're assuming there's no transportation costs, but obviously that would be part of your strategy as well if you were going to actually implement this. But for the moment, we're just going to ignore that. Okay, so what we have here is we have there is no profit or loss from this strategy, which means our exchange rate is correct. Now we're going to look at what would happen if that exchange rate was not correct. Okay. If that exchange rate is not correct, then we would have an arbitrage opportunity. What is arbitrage? Arbitrage means there is a mispricing in the market. Mispricing means there's a problem with some prices. Okay, so one of the prices is not correct. In this case, the exchange rate is incorrect at £4 per $4 per pound. Okay, so we know the exchange rate should be 4.86. What if the exchange rate is $4 per pound instead? Well, there is a mispricing there. Yeah, the exchange rate is wrong. So we can trade to take advantage of that mispricing. So let's have a look at what we would do. What would we do? Well, we would buy gold in one country, sell it in another, convert back to the original currency. Okay, there's two ways we could do this. So we're looking at the UK and the US. I could start in the US, buy gold in the US and sell it in the UK, or I could buy gold in the UK and sell it in the US. So can you work out? So what I'm going to do here is, so for example, in the first strategy, I'm going to buy gold in the US, sell it in the UK, and then convert my pounds back to US dollars at this rate, and then work out. So on the third step, I would be back in what currency? Yep, so I'd be back in US dollars, and then you can work out your profit. Okay. In the second strategy, I'm going to start in the UK, buy gold in the UK, sell it in the US, convert back to pounds, and then work out my profit. So can you please work out the profit or loss on these strategies?
Should.
right, are you done? Your hand up if you're done. Okay. 1 more minute. Okay, so first strategy, we're going to buy gold in the US, we're going to sell it in the UK, and then we're going to convert our pounds back to US dollars at $4 per pound. Right, so I'm going to end up with $16.98. Yes? Yep. Okay, profit? Loss. Yep, so I started with $20 and now I've got $16.98. So I made a loss of $3.68. Okay, what about if I started in the UK? So I start in the UK, I convert to US dollars, I convert back to pounds at the exchange rate, £5.1675. Yep. And so, again, yep, a profit of £0.92. What are the, yeah. Yeah. Oh, okay. So you could calculate the profit in US dollars. Yeah, yeah. All right. So which strategy are we going to use? The second one. The second one. So by the way, so I have dollars and cents, and there is pounds and pence. Pounds and pence. Okay. So this means the profit was 92 pence. The British also say p, 92p. Okay, you know how we have c for cents? They use p for pence. Okay, so 92 pence or 92p. So what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to use the second strategy because I can make an arbitrage profit. All right. So let's look at what is happening in this strategy. I am buying gold in where? In the UK. Then what do I do? How? Yes? Good. I'm going to ship the gold out of the UK to the US. All right. Now, what's happened to the supply of gold in the UK? Okay, first of all, how many people do you think are going to use this opportunity? Everybody who's worked it out. Yeah? Okay, so we have everybody seeing this arbitrage opportunity. So what are they going to do? They're going to buy gold in the UK, ship it to the US. What's happened to the supply of gold or the amount of gold in the UK? It's gone down. What's happened to the amount of gold in the US? It's increased. Okay, so we have gold actually coming out of the UK into the US. All right. So part of the only way that the gold standard can work properly, if the government is willing to intervene with the supply of money. Now remember, we said the gold standard, under the gold standard, currency had to be backed by gold. Okay? So if you've got gold coming out of so you've got gold leaving the UK, we've got a reduction in the amount of gold. Okay? So here we've got the gold leaving the UK going to the US. So we've got a reduction in the amount of gold. What that means is for UK currency, for the pound, that pound needs to change as well because there is now less gold available in the UK. Remember we said that the currency has to be matched by the amount of gold that's in that country. Okay, that's how the gold standard works. Okay, so what's going to happen now? So we have, if you want to think about it, you can think about there's like too much currency floating around. Okay, so the central bank so what they will do is they will basically take pounds out of supply. Okay, so they will remove pounds out of supply. Why? Because we've got less gold, so therefore we need less pounds. Yeah? What happens when supply of anything decreases? What happens to price? If supply goes down, what happens to price? Price goes up. Okay, so we should then see the amount of price of gold in pounds doing what? Increasing, okay? So gold is going out of England and it's going to the US. What's happening to the supply of gold in the US? The supply of gold is increasing, okay? So now we have more gold in the US. So what's going to need to happen to the money supply in the US? The money supply. Remember, the gold supply must match the money supply. So if we have more gold, we need more US dollars, okay? So they need to go up together, okay? So what happens when the supply increases? What happens to price? Price goes down, okay? So we should see in the UK the price is going to go up and the price of the US dollar is going to go down. What's that going to do to the exchange rate? So I remember our exchange rate was £1 to 4 US dollars, yeah? So if the pound becomes stronger, okay, because the price of the pound is going to go up, are you going to be able to buy more or less US dollars? More, okay? So what will happen to the exchange rate? So remember, our incorrect exchange rate was £1 is $4. So will it be more or less than $4? More. So this mechanism is going to push the exchange rate up. Yep. So until what point? When there is no gain, which is what? Yeah, very good. So the exchange rate should be, this is the correct exchange rate. So for the gold standard to work correctly, the price specie flow mechanism needs to be in place, all right? So if it's not, we're going to see gold moving between countries until the exchange rates become correct. Make sense? Okay, very good. Okay, so this worked, okay. Another nice thing about the gold standard, how much gold is there in the world? Is it very abundant? No, it's a finite product, right? Mm-hmm. So gold, the gold standard meant that exchange rates were relatively stable, right? And relatively low inflation because gold is pretty rare. Okay, and then this price specie flow mechanism meant that the exchange rate should be correct. Now the gold standard worked pretty well until the outbreak of the First World War. Why? What was the gold standard relying on? It was relying first of all on free movement of gold, and second of all on governments being willing to change the supply of money. Okay, if you have a war, a world war, okay, so remember what is necessary here? The free movement of gold. And how are we moving gold again? By ship. What's happening during a war? Bombing, right? Shooting. Easy to move gold around? No. Okay. So during the First World War, there was an because the war had broken out. It's no longer viable to move gold around the world. Okay. All right. So in between the two wars, okay, so what we also saw happen was we saw inflation get out of control. What is inflation? Yep, the price of what? Good. So inflation is about the price of goods going up, okay? So as an example here we have a German housewife burning mark notes. So mark was the German currency, yeah? So she's burning the notes because it's cheaper to burn the notes than to actually buy wood, right? So the inflation was so crazy. All right, we're going to watch a little news clip from that time about the collapse of the gold standard. So, okay, so we've been talking about the gold standard. So gold standard worked until the First World War. So in between the world wars, a difficult time, right? A difficult time. So what we saw was a lot of countries depreciating their currencies so that they could stimulate their exports, give them an advantage. What happens if you have a weak currency? What does that do to the price of your goods in another country? If you have a weak currency, are your goods cheap or expensive in another country? Cheap. Cheap, okay. So we see countries depreciating their currencies to make it more attractive for exports, right? To make their exports more attractive. There were attempts to restore the gold standard, but we didn't see, but governments were not willing to follow the rules of the game. What was that? What we talked about with the price specie flow mechanism. Okay, so basically, not a good time for the gold standard. What happened next was the establishment of what was called the Bretton Woods system. Okay, so what is Bretton Woods? Bretton Woods is actually a place. So the system is named after the place where the agreement was entered into. So we had 44 nations meeting at Bretton Woods in New Hampshire to try and design a new monetary system, a new international monetary system to replace the gold standard. Okay. So what did we want? We want exchange rate stability, but we don't want the gold standard. So at this time, the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, was also established, so where countries could borrow from the IMF, so these 44 nations, and the World Bank as well. So we'll come back to the IMF in a minute. So we know the IMF still exists, yes? IMF is still with us, as is the World Bank. Okay, so how did Bretton Woods work? Well, the Bretton Woods is an example of a fixed exchange regime. What does fixed mean? The two currencies, when we have two currencies, the exchange rate is predetermined. It's not going to change. Okay? So the US was fixed in terms of gold. The US dollar was fixed in terms of gold. So same as the gold standard, right? So US dollar being fixed in terms of gold at $35 per ounce. Other countries fixed their currency to the US dollar. Okay? Currencies were allowed to move up and down within 1% of their fixed exchange rate. Okay? So, this is what it looked like. The US dollar was pegged to gold, so the US dollar was fixed to gold at $35 per ounce, and all other currencies were fixed to the US dollar. Right? Okay. So as I said, so participating currency, their exchange rate is fixed to the US dollar within that 1%, more or less 1%. So the currency could fluctuate a little bit. How do they maintain that exchange rate? By buying or selling gold or foreign reserves, foreign currency reserves. What are the foreign currency reserves going to be? US dollars. Okay, because everybody was fixed to the US dollar. Every currency was fixed to the US dollar. They agreed that they're not going to devalue their currencies. Okay, so we're not going to play this game where we're going to have massive devaluation so we can get an advantage in the export market. Of course, countries can experience shocks. So there was an agreement that if something very bad happened, yes, countries would be allowed to devalue up to 10%. Okay, so out of that 1% band. Beyond that, they're going to actually need to ask for approval from the IMF. Now, the US, so what we said was the US dollar was going to be fixed against gold at what price? $35 per ounce, okay. But that was agreed upon, but it wasn't actually a legal restriction. Okay, so they did not declare an official parity, means that, yes, they agreed it was going to be $35, but it wasn't actually legally binding, all right? So, what's going on? What is the problem with this system? The problem with this system is that you have the US dollars being fixed to gold, everybody else being fixed to US dollars. So the currency that the countries are all going to, other countries are all going to hold as for their foreign reserves is going to be what? US dollars, okay? So think about that. So all of these 44 nations that were involved in Bretton Woods, they're going to be wanting to hold US dollars as a reserve, right? As a reserve, like a government savings sort of thing, okay? As a reserve. So what is that going to mean for the amount of US dollars that the world needs? A lot, a little bit? A lot. So we've got 44 countries that have US dollars as their reserves. So if countries want to increase their reserves, what does that mean? They're going to want more US dollars, okay? So what this means is basically the US is going to have to run what we call a balance of payments deficit. Okay, so the US dollar is like it's like the money is coming out of the US, right? If countries want to build their reserves, they're going to want more and more US dollars. So what should happen to the value of the US dollar? It should decrease because the supply is needing to increase, okay? But what's the problem? The problem is the US dollar is fixed at $35 per ounce, okay? So we've got the US running constant balance of payment deficits. Okay? A balance of payment deficit is a signal that there's actually, in a normal economy, a balance of payments deficit means that the country is not net saving, it's net losing, okay, or net borrowing. So what's that going to do for the confidence in your government if you have constant deficits? Exactly. So what this meant was that there's going to be a reduction in the confidence in the US dollar. So there was this problem because there is a disparity between international policy, so everyone holding US dollars, and domestic policy, the US having to run a balance of payment deficits. Okay. So eventually, what happened was the US dollar did depreciate. Okay, to $42 per ounce, right? And eventually, the Bretton Woods collapsed, okay, because of this issue. In 1970, the IMF created special drawing rights, so they moved to a basket currency that IMF members could use between themselves to borrow or lend. So it's like an alternative to instead of having to use the US dollars, okay. However, even with that, we see the collapse of the Bretton Woods. And I think, okay, yep, so I've got another video for you to have a look at another US president. This time we have President Nixon, who was...
Looking at the Kennedys, I make an interesting comparison.
All right. Okay, so Bretton Woods, finished, collapsed, 1973. From there, we moved into a flexible or a floating exchange rate regime. So the International Monetary Fund said floating exchange rates were now acceptable. What this means is that supply and demand for currencies can determine what the exchange rate is going to be. Central banks are allowed to intervene in the exchange rate markets if they want to try and reduce volatility. So in other words, central banks can buy or sell their currency to try and increase supply or demand, increase or decrease supply, and therefore impact on the exchange rates. Gold was abandoned as a reserve asset. Now remember, initially there were 44 countries involved in Bretton Woods. At this point in time, other countries, less developed countries, were also allowed to borrow from the International Monetary Fund. Okay, so under a floating rate system, exchange rate completely determined by supply and demand. Capital controls abolished, and so we saw a little bit more of an opening up of financial markets. Countries' monetary and macroeconomic policies were independent from that of the US. Why would it not have been under Bretton Woods? If your money is tied to another currency, what's happening in that country's economy is going to impact on your country as well, right? So the value of your currency is tied to another currency. So what's happening with that currency is going to impact on what's happening in your country. So with a flexible exchange rate no longer being tied to the US dollar, that means that countries have more flexibility to implement their own monetary and macroeconomic policies. 1973, a number of European currencies were allowed to float, and a number of Japanese currencies as well. Okay, so what was happening in Australia at this time? 1931 to 71, the Australian dollar was pegged to the British pound. It was then pegged to the US dollar, 1971 to 74. So we saw that in 73, we saw Bretton Woods collapse. Many countries started to float, but actually Australian dollars did not float at that stage. One of the reasons that's been given is because the financial sector was not that developed at that point in time. Okay, so in the late 1970s, the Australian dollar was pegged to the Trade Weight Index. TWI is the Trade Weight Index. It's like a portfolio of currencies. Okay. trade weight, it's a portfolio of different currencies, so not just pegged to one specific currency. In 1979, the trade weight index peg was changed to a crawling peg. So where you have a fixed exchange rate, that is what the exchange rate is going to be. With a crawling peg, the exchange rate is allowed to move a little bit, okay, from time to time. So it's moved from a fixed exchange rate to a crawling peg. In 1983, finally, the Australian dollar was floated. So this is a graph of the history. So here we have Australian dollar versus pounds, US dollars, and trade weighted index. So we see in the earliest, until 71, we see this peg to the British pound. So the exchange rate is just flat, right? So it always stays the same. Here we see that at this point in time, we now move to a peg to the US dollar, the trade weight index peg in the final graph, and then the crawling peg, so which is allowing for movements in exchange rates. 1983, we see the Australian dollar being floated. So what happened to the volatility when the dollar was floated? What happened to volatility? Did volatility decrease or increase? Volatility increased, right? So the change in the exchange rates is much more. So we see here the exchange rate. You can look at the Australian dollar, US dollar. Okay, so here's when we have a peg situation, and here's when we have free floating. Okay, so where you have a free floating currency, then you have a lot more exchange rate, because the exchange rate is determined by supply and demand, and that's going to be changing over time. Okay, so even today, not all countries have floating exchange rates. So not all currencies are determined by supply and demand. The International Monetary Fund classifies 10 separate regimes. So no separate legal tender. That means that country does not have its own currency. So they'll use another country's currency. For example, some countries use US dollars, right? As we move currency board, conventional peg up to free floating, okay? So more control, less control. So free floating completely determined by supply and demand. Conventional peg fixed to another currency. Now, homework for you. Please go and have a look at what all of these terms mean. Okay? It is in your textbook, so you should be able to see what those are there. All right, so basically, at the one extreme, we've got a free floating exchange rate, so completely determined by supply and demand. Here, at this end of the scale, we have what's basically a fixed exchange rate, so a peg or a fixed exchange rate. So what is the advantage of what is the advantage of one or the other? The advantage of a fixed exchange rate is that there's not you reduce exchange rate risk. You know what the exchange rate is going to be because it's fixed. Okay. Unfortunately, that can discourage trade and investment. The good thing is, so a credible nominal anchor for monetary policy. In other words, you always know what this currency is going to be worth. Okay. And it's obvious. It's obvious what the currency is worth, so transparency of the regime. The advantages of a floating exchange rate is that you can pursue an international monetary policy. The value of your currency is not determined by the value of another currency. Okay? So you're not tied, your currency is not tied to another currency, right? So what happens if you have a pegged exchange rate? To some extent, you're tied to what's going on in that country's economy. Okay? So that's a disadvantage of the fixed exchange rate. Another advantage is that you can use monetary policy to impact on what's going to be happening in the economy. We'll talk more about that in 1 second. Okay, so how do these things work? So we're going to look at supply and demand curves. Yeah, we've seen these before. Yes, so demand curve downward sloping, supply curve upward sloping. All right, what happens in a fixed rate regime? We're going to have a pretend example of the Australian dollar being fixed to the pound. Okay, so we want the Australian dollar to be fixed to the pound at 1 Australian dollar is 35 pence. So 12.35. Okay, so currently, yep, so we've got supply and demand meeting and the price should be 0.35. Now what happens if something happens and there is an increase in demand for the Australian dollar? So when we have an increase in demand, the demand curve shifts up. When we have an increase in demand, what should happen to price? price should increase, right? Okay, so when we have an increase in demand, the price should move up from 0.35 to something else, let's say 50 pence, okay? However, we have a fixed exchange rate regime. So we cannot have an exchange rate of 50 pence. It has to be 35. So how do we get to 35? Well, in this case, the government needs to intervene. The government needs to intervene, okay? So what they're going to need to do is increase the supply of dollars, okay? So the government has to increase the supply of dollars. What will that do? That will shift the supply curve, right? Sideways. Increase supply, what does that do to price? Should decrease the price. So the supply needs to be increased until the price goes down to back to 35 cents. Remember, that was our fixed rate. Okay. So what is this saying? When you have a fixed exchange rate, the central bank needs to intervene in the foreign exchange markets to maintain that exchange rate. All right? What happens when we have a free floating exchange rate? So we're going to start the same. We're going to start at an exchange rate of 35 cents, $1 to 35 pence, sorry. We have an increase in demand, so the demand curve shifts, the price therefore increases. So we know price is determined by where supply and demand curves meet, yeah? Yeah, okay. So the supply increases, sorry, the demand increases, so the price should increase. What does the central bank do? Correct. The central bank does not intervene because under a floating regime, the exchange rate is going to be determined by supply and demand. So if demand goes up, that means the exchange rate is going to go up. Yeah? So the exchange rate will stay at what? 50 or 52 or whatever it is, right? So that's the difference between a fixed and a floating exchange rate. So under a floating or a free floating exchange rate, the exchange rate can just be determined by supply and demand. The government is not trying to intervene to control it. Now, even under a free floating system, if things go really extremely out of whack, governments can still intervene occasionally. Okay, but at the heart of the system is it's determined by supply and demand. All right. Any questions so far? Yep. Alrighty. So, what should a currency look like? What should a currency look like? Now, governments have three things that they would really like when we're looking at currencies. Firstly, exchange rate stability. What does that mean? The exchange rate doesn't change a lot. Okay. Full financial integration. That means that money can flow freely into and out of the country. Okay, money can flow freely into and out of the country, free flow of capital. So investors can bring their money in or they can take their money out. Oops. And thirdly, monetary independence. So the government can intervene by, if they want to. An example of a monetary policy would be if we had a recession. Okay, if we had a recession, the Reserve Bank can change the interest rates. So we know central banks, so in Australia, the central bank is called the Reserve Bank of Australia, the RBA. Yep. In America, it's the Federal Reserve or the Fed. Yeah, good. Okay. But the global name is the central bank. Okay. So we have a recession. We have a recession. What do we want to do? We want to make people spend more money. Yeah? So we can stimulate the economy. So what a central bank can do to stimulate the economy is they can cut interest rates. What will cutting interest rates will do? Well, I have a choice what I can do with my money. I can save it or I can spend it. If interest rates are low, that means not very attractive for me to save. Yep, it also means cheap credit. Cheap credit. What's that going to do? That's going to mean increased spending, okay, and therefore try and get the economy out of recession by making people spend. Okay, so that's an example of monetary policy. Yep. So decreasing or increasing interest rates in a country, that's domestic policy. Okay, so we want exchange rate stability, we want free flow of capital, and we want monetary independence. Unfortunately, it is not possible to have all three, right? You cannot have all three simultaneously. So different exchange rate regimes will be able to have at maximum two of those things. All right. So this is just here showing that diagrammatically. So on the sides of the triangle, we have the three attributes that we want. So monetary independence, exchange rate stability, full financial integration. And on the corners, we have different types of exchange rate regime. Okay, so in a pure float, we can have monetary independence and full financial integration, but we can't have exchange rate stability. An example is the US. Okay, we're going to look at how this works in a second. If you want exchange rate stability and full financial integration, you can't have monetary independence. An example is the European Monetary Union. If you want monetary independence and exchange rate stability, you can't have full financial integration. Can anybody think of an example of a country where you have monetary independence and exchange rate stability, but you don't have full financial integration? Yes, potentially. Good. Anywhere else? Is anybody Vietnamese? Okay, so I think the Vietnamese dong would be an example. So it's not actually. So the dong is not a traded currency, right? You're not actually allowed to take it in or out of the country. Same with Lao. Yeah. So if you're not allowed to move currency into or out of the country, what don't you have? Good. You don't have full financial integration. Remember, full financial integration, free flow of capital. Free flow of capital. So if you have a currency which is not traded, so people are not allowed to take the money out of the currency out of your country, that means you don't have full financial integration. It does mean that you have monetary independence, right? So the government can stimulate the economy if they want to. And usually, very often, those currencies are pegged, okay, to the US dollar, for example. So you've got exchange rate stability. So that would be an example of a currency that would sit up here, right? Okay, let's have a look at why you can't have all three. Let's work through it in an example. We've got two countries, A and B. They currently have the same interest rate, 5%. A really wants to achieve all three goals. They want to stimulate growth. How are we going to do that? Yeah, we're going to cut interest rates. Okay, we're going to cut interest rates from 5 to 3%. That is a monetary policy intervention. So we have monetary independence. Tick. Okay, good. So our interest rates move from 5% to 3%. What does that mean for international investors? Does your country look attractive? I used to be able to earn 5% when I was investing in A. I can now earn 3%. Not attractive, right? So what am I going to do with my money? I'm going to get out. Yeah? And where am I going to go? I'm going to go to country B. Okay? So what's going to happen? We have money, so international investors taking their money out of country A. Yeah? What is that? Full financial integration. Good. So money moving out of A. Excellent. Okay. So as the money goes out of A, A's currency is going to depreciate. Okay? Does that mean A's currency is stable? No. So yes, we were able to get monetary independence. Yes, we were able to get full integration. Unfortunately, we couldn't get exchange rate stability. Okay. We want exchange rate stability. So what are we going to do? Central bank is going to intervene in the market to affect the supply. Yeah, by buying Australian dollars. Oh, sorry, buying A's dollars. So the value of A's dollars goes up. Yeah. So the value's gone up. What does that mean for A's ability to export? If your currency appreciates, what does that mean about your goods? More or less expensive? More expensive? What will that do to your exports? Less exports. What does less exports do for growth? It's going to reduce your growth. What was the initial aim? Stimulate growth. The initial, okay. So do you see how you can't have all three at the same time? Yeah? All right. There's quite a nice clip on Blackboard. It's a little cartoon which explains the impossible trinity. So go have a look at that. Little hint, your assignment is also on the impossible trinity, so make sure you get your head around this. Okay, let's have a look at two real examples of the impossible trinity. So the US, full financial integration. Can you buy US dollars and sell them? Can you get money into and out of the US? Yes. Okay, so we've got 1. Monetary independence. Yes, the Fed can intervene, right? They can increase or decrease exchange rates. Interest rates. Is the exchange rate stable? Here's the US, the value of the US dollar. Stable? No. So on the impossible trinity, the US dollar, or indeed any floating currency, is you're going to be able to have full financial integration, monetary independence, but you cannot have exchange rate stability. All right? We're going to look at the European Monetary Union. I'll talk a little bit about the background behind the European Monetary Union, and then we'll also look at it in terms of the impossible trinity as well. Okay? So the European monetary system was created in 1979, basically to create within Europe a zone of monetary stability. So members had to restrict exchange fluctuations between countries in the system. In 1991, there was a treaty at Maastricht. So again, Maastricht is a place in Holland. Yep. So it's the name of the country where the city where the treaty was established. So in 1991, there was an agreement to form a single European currency by 1999, and the establishment of the European Monetary Union. Now, in 4th of January 1999, so in your notes I've written it as numbers, so I thought I'd write it in full so we know it's January and not April, flip the other way. So it's the 4th of January 1999, and we had 11 currencies that pegged their currencies against the euro. In 2001, Greece joined the euro, and we had euro notes and coins introduced in January 2002. So there are currently 28 current countries in the European Union, but not all of them use the euro. Okay, so we have the European Union, which is the European zone of monetary stability, but not all of those countries use the euro. 19 of those countries use the euro, not all of them. Again, on Blackboard there is a little clip showing the difference between the European Union, the Eurozone, and the currency. Okay, so have a look at that as well. There was also the establishment of the European Central Bank. Right? So what we have now is we have a number of countries using the same currency. So we have 19 countries using the same currency. What are the benefits? So within the Eurozone, we've got lower transaction costs. Right? So if you move between France and Germany and Greece, it's all one currency. Okay, so if you've got goods moving between countries, you don't have to worry about exchange rates. When you exchange money, also there is a cost. As we all know, unfortunately, when we exchange our money, the bank takes a little cut, right? Okay, so same thing. So there's lower transaction costs because we don't have to have changing the exchange rates. We don't have exchange rate uncertainty because everybody's using the same currency. Okay, we've got increased price-based competition. Why? Because now the cost of a good in France is going to be in euro, and it's also going to be in euro in Greece. So the cost of the good is very obvious because it's in the same currency. So what do we have? We have exchange rate stability, at least within that zone, within those 19 countries. We have financial integration. So yeah, you can buy and sell euro, so we can have capital flowing into and out of it. Okay, however, what are the costs? Well, we have, so we've got the establishment of one currency. What happened was there were controls put upon each of the countries that had joined in with the euro. Okay, so firstly, inflation has to be controlled. So the countries have to control their inflation. So for the ones that have the lowest inflation rate, no more than 1%, 1.5%. Long-term interest rates have to be controlled. Okay, fiscal deficit needs to be controlled. Government debt needs to be controlled as well. So any country that is in the Eurozone is going to need to abide by these rules. What does that mean? That means we do not have monetary independence. Okay? Okay. So, a little bit more specifically, we might have a shock. Asymmetric shock means we have an economic shock to one country but not another country. Okay, asymmetric shock. When we have a shock occurring in one country but not another country, that's going to have implications. So, for example, we don't have the same unemployment rate across Europe, right? Germany's got a very low unemployment rate of 3.6% compared with 20%, right? So, what happens if we want to stimulate our economy? What did we talk about before? We want to stimulate our economy. We're going to cut interest rates. Okay. Governments are no longer allowed to do that because they are part of the Eurozone. Right? So what that means, so countries cannot just cut interest rates to try and stimulate growth, to try and increase unemployment. All right? Theoretically, in the Eurozone, there is free movement of people, but what if you can't get a job in another country? Okay. So, again, what is this saying? There is no monetary independence for those countries in the Eurozone. Yes, they have exchange rate stability, at least within the zone, and yes, they have full financial integration, but they have to give up monetary independence. Okay, so again, with the impossible trinity, they're only going to be able to get 2 of the 3. Questions? Okay, so where was this an issue? One of the big... okay, so Greece joined the Eurozone in... I beg your pardon? Greece started using the euro in 2001, right? Now, Greece actually had quite a weak economy. In 2009, the Greek government revealed that their budget deficit is actually going to be 12%. Remember, the rules would have to be 3%. Okay? So it was going to be 12%, not what they previously said, at 3%. Right? So the Greek government is in trouble. When we see an economic shock like that, what should normally happen is the currency should depreciate. All right? Unfortunately, what currency was Greece using? The euro. Okay? So Greece cannot let the currency depreciate because it's in this union with 18 other countries. Right? Okay? So we don't have that monetary, so that particular policy is not available when you have a serious shock to one of the countries in the union. Okay? So this was like a real world example of where being in a monetary union actually takes away that monetary independence. Right? Okay. Finally, Bitcoin. So what is Bitcoin? Bitcoin is it's a cryptocurrency. It's based on peer-to-peer technology, so it's based through networks of computers. It's not issued by one particular country or a bank, right? It's managed completely within the network. Open source, okay, so anybody can take part in Bitcoin. Now, your assignment is on Bitcoin, so I'm not going to tell you too much more about it, but it's an exciting assignment, right? Yes. Okay, so I will show you a little clip, though, on how Bitcoin works. All right. Okay, so next week we are going to be looking at the foreign exchange market. So next week we will be doing a lot more calculations. Please bring your calculator and your pens next week. Otherwise, that is it from me for today. As I said, there are revision questions and answers available on Blackboard, so please make sure you go and take a look at those. Otherwise, I will see you next week.